A storm rolled across the Kola Peninsula the night the vault opened. Ice shattered under the weight of machinery as researchers from the Murmansk Polar Institute lowered floodlights into a shaft no satellite had ever mapped. Beneath 60 years of permafrost, the walls bore Cyrillic stencils and rusted hazard emblems. Zimovie, Opasnost. The air smelled of metal, ozone, and something older, sealed since the height of the Cold War. Cameras flickered as the first door cracked open, revealing a corridor lined with frostbitten steel drums and reels of magnetic tape fused to the floor. The lead investigator, Dr. Anya Volkov, whispered the project name they'd only seen in redacted files, Operation Winter Forge. What began as a routine excavation for climate data had instead exhumed a buried command facility, and a story Moscow had erased from its own history. Chapter 1. Operation Winter Forge Unearthed. The official coordinates read 68°58'N, 33°05'E, an uninhabited section of tundra north of Murmansk, designated as unfit for civilian development since 1964. Satellite imagery listed the region as Permafrost Instability Zone B14, but when the drilling team arrived, they found a geometric heat signature beneath the ice. The site was mapped to a depth of 12 meters, where a sealed titanium hatch lay embedded in rock. Bolted plates bore the stamp of the Soviet Ministry of Medium Machine Building, the department responsible for nuclear materials management. According to declassified defense industry records, no such structure was ever built this far north. Dr. Anya Volkov had been studying Cold War-era atmospheric contamination when she received an unmarked USB drive from an anonymous address in Arkhangelsk. Inside were digitized schematics of a subarctic research complex labeled Facility Z13, signed off by Colonel V. Korolyov, dated March 1958. Korolyov's name appeared in no Ministry of Defense rosters, but his signature matched that of a project manager for early isotope reactor tests along the Yenisei. Volkov submitted the files to the Russian State Archive, which denied their authenticity within 24 hours. 2 weeks later, her research grant was revoked without explanation. That was when she decided to go north on her own funding, taking with her a small team of glaciologists and one former GRU technician named Yuri Antonov. Antonov's memories of the early 1980s were fractured. He described whispers within the directorate about a self-sustaining heat cell buried somewhere beyond the Barents coast. He remembered a code name, Zimovie. It had been referred to as a last resort reactor system designed for Arctic operation, meant to maintain communications and power after a nuclear strike. But others believed it was something far less stable, an experiment in isotope propulsion that went catastrophically wrong. The Soviet archives, of course, contained nothing under that designation. Every reference to Zimovie was struck through in black ink across the 1963 internal energy reports. Still, the coordinates embedded in the schematic pointed precisely to the heat signature Volkov's radar had detected. The descent began in early February 2023. The Arctic light was dim even at midday, and winds screamed across the excavation pit as cranes pulled up frozen soil. The titanium hatch resisted thermal cutting for nearly 6 hours before finally releasing a hiss of pressurized air. A layer of ice cracked open to reveal a downward shaft lined with corroded ladders. The first person to enter was Antonov, camera attached to his helmet. His voice echoed through the comm feed. "It's intact. Smells like ozone and burnt dust." When the floodlights powered on, the team saw rows of steel containers stenciled with designations like T02, Phasa 3, and Objekt 47. Seria V. They opened one of the crates. Inside was a cylindrical core, still emitting faint radiation. The readings were low but unmistakable. On the inner casing, scratched into the metal, was a serial code, ZN 1958K. That sequence matched an entry in the ministry's logbook for experimental isotope drives, devices designed to heat air or water through radioactive decay without combustion. But what chilled Volkov was the attached instruction sheet, laminated in plastic. The paper bore a header reading Winter Forge, Phase 3 Field Implementation Directive. It described thermal containment failures in prior prototypes and listed losses, classified under the remarks section. The last update was dated November 1962. That was the year multiple Soviet Arctic weather stations went silent for reasons never disclosed. Further inside, the tunnel widened into a main chamber, half collapsed, its walls streaked with crystalline frost. A central console lay frozen under a film of ice. Volkov brushed it clean to reveal toggle switches labeled in faded Cyrillic: reactor, coolant, emergency seal. When Antonov restored minimal power through a portable generator, the old filaments buzzed weakly to life, and a bank of indicator lamps flickered green for a moment before dying again. He found a magnetic tape unit still intact and removed the reel. The label read OPA Journal, 1961, Winter Forge, Phase 2. They took it to the surface for preservation. Weeks later, at a secure facility in St. Petersburg, the magnetic tape was restored and digitized. The voice on the recording, though degraded, was clearly that of a military engineer reading from a test log. Cycle 3 operational. Core temperature stable at 43 degrees. Fuel composite not responding as predicted. Radiation leak suspected in containment cell 2. Recommend full evacuation. Then a long pause, followed by a second voice, harsher, commanding, continue testing. Do not report to directorate until confirmation of sustained output. The tape ended abruptly in static. Handwriting on the tape box read, final report, sealed per order of Colonel Korolyov. Archival cross-reference revealed that in late 1962, the ministry dispatched a classified convoy northward, led by the 9th Technical Detachment. Their route terminated at Murmansk, but their return manifest was missing. Internal communications from that winter mentioned an industrial incident, causing atmospheric contamination near the Barents coast. Western satellites recorded a thermal bloom lasting 3 days, misidentified at the time as glacial activity. No surviving personnel records ever surfaced. Until now. By April, the excavation site had been fenced off by military authorities under environmental protection clauses. Volkov's access credentials were revoked, and all collected samples were seized for national security review. She filed multiple petitions to retrieve her data. Each was denied. Weeks later, an anonymous email arrived containing a single attached image, a scan of a top-secret memorandum labeled USSR, Minmedmash, Internal Memo 4-41-13. The document described the recall of an Arctic isotope test facility after loss of command function. Its closing line read, site sealed per directive, no recovery. Zimovye remains. Volkov's last field notes describe her decision to return without authorization. The following year, independent journalists retrieved drone footage showing activity around the same coordinates, fresh tire tracks, new fencing, and a pair of unmarked vehicles with covered plates. Locals reported hearing metallic vibrations from beneath the ice during warm periods, as though machinery was still operating below. Satellite infrared scans detected periodic heat surges, small but distinct, emanating from under 12 meters of permafrost. Russian authorities dismissed them as methane releases, but the readings repeated every 48 hours with mathematical precision. It was a signal, mechanical, deliberate, and decades old. Chapter 2: The Ghost Files of Dresden. The microfilm arrived at the Berlin University archives inside a weathered brown envelope, its postmark smudged, its sender untraceable. The label, typed on brittle adhesive paper, read only, DDR, Referat Dresden, 12B. Inside were 14 reels of microfilm sealed in aluminum canisters, each stamped with an official East German insignia of the Ministry for State Security, Stasi Department XX7. When archivist Helena Kruger fed the first reel into the reader, the grainy images revealed not routine administrative forms, but dense transcripts from 1949 to 1952, catalogued under the codename Project Morgenlicht. The pages were marked streng geheim and cross-referenced with earlier, Nazi-era case files labeled Ahnenerbe, Psychologische Versuchreihe. It appeared to be a continuation of research once attributed to SS physician Dr. Erich Hahn, experiments on cognitive reprogramming and sensory deprivation conducted in underground facilities outside Dresden. The anomaly was immediate. Dr. Hahn had been executed in 1947, according to Allied tribunal records. Yet here was his signature, dated 5 years later, next to GDR officials' approvals for subject transfer. Protocols. The documents referenced a transitional medical authority, a shell organization, allegedly formed to reabsorb unprosecuted specialists from wartime programs. In post-war East Germany, The desperate reconstruction of intelligence services had blurred the line between captured science and ideological rehabilitation. The microfilm detailed over 200 test cases involving psychophysical reconditioning techniques, methods to suppress and overwrite memory using controlled isolation, chemical sedation, and repetitive suggestion cycles. These were not theoretical notes. They were procedural manuals, each signed and archived. Kruger alerted the Federal Archives, and the documentation was swiftly seized under the German Federal Data Protection Act. 2 weeks later, a redacted press statement announced that the reels contained irrelevant Cold War materials. Yet a backup copy had already been made. In that duplicate, the final reel contained something unusual: a memo from a Stasi field office in Leipzig, dated 1963, titled Projekt Morgenlicht, Ergebnisse und Empfehlungen. The concluding paragraph read, "Subject stability maintained after 36 months. Identity reformation consistent with projection model. Memory overwrite complete. Recommend integration into foreign operations." Names of the reformed individuals were heavily censored, but one line survived unredacted. Subject 7, Ich Reinhardt, relocation complete, occupation, clerical staff. West Berlin Consulate. The implication was staggering. Someone the GDR had allegedly brainwashed during the early Cold War had been successfully embedded in Western territory as an unaware operative. Kruger's colleagues dismissed the notion as Cold War propaganda. However, handwriting analysis conducted by linguistics expert Professor Lothar Engel confirmed that the marginal notes belonged to Hahn himself. The ink's chemical profile matched that used in East German laboratory archives during the early 1950s, proving the documents were authentic. Forensic historians began tracing Hahn's paper trail backward. Before his reported execution, Hahn had been detained at the Allied internment facility in Landsberg. Declassified US Army Medical Detachment reports, specifically file MDS-214 from 1947, contained an unsigned addendum. Subject H, transferred to special custody. Objective, SCI 92. In intelligence parlance, SCI denoted Scientific Cooperation Initiative, an early joint Allied effort to extract useful expertise from captured Axis scientists before Soviet intervention. The designation 92 correlated with transfers routed through the British zone, meaning Hahn may have been relocated, not executed. Documents from the same series describe a convoy departure to Dresden under US oversight, justified as industrial site reclamation. What the convoy transported was unclear, but the arrival logs of the Saxon Medical Institute list a Dr. Hahn among newly appointed consultants in 1948. His personnel file, however, was deleted from the Institute's archive in 1961 under an internal audit order signed by an unidentified ministry representative. For decades, no trace of his activities survived until Kruger's microfilm. Independent journalists soon uncovered corroborating evidence. In 1994, during renovation of a derelict psychiatric ward in Pirna Sonnenstein, workers found a hidden compartment containing audio reels and patient charts dated 1950-1952. The tags on the boxes read, Section C, Reflex Phase. The recordings captured muted voices, repeating statements in rhythmic unison. Phrases like, Ich erinnere mich nicht, and Die Vergangenheit ist gelöscht, I do not remember, and The past is erased. Background noises suggested isolation chambers, ventilation hum, metal restraints, water dripping. Acoustic analysis of one voice matched a known East German intelligence officer later stationed in Karl-Marx-Stadt. He was never treated as a patient. The Pirna documents mirrored the Project Morgenlicht protocols almost word for word, including a chilling instruction. Administer amnestic compound until compliance exceeds 72 hours. Introduce alternate biographical stimuli. Reinforce daily through auditory loops. The chemical referenced, Compound 53B, was identified decades later as a barbiturate lithium mix used in early GDR psychiatric hospitals. If these methods were ever applied outside controlled conditions, they could render a subject's identity unstable, effectively rewriting memory under sustained suggestion. Chapter 3. The Silent Tower of Vysoké Tatry. In late autumn of 2022, hikers in Slovakia's High Tatras captured drone footage of an odd concrete shape breaking through the snow near the old Czechoslovak border defense line. The footage went viral briefly before it was taken down by local authorities. Within weeks, geologists working under the Slovak Ministry of the Interior confirmed that the structure, approximately 20 meters tall, was no natural formation. What they found, once the snow melted, was an antenna tower of Soviet design buried beneath layers of pine roots and rockslide debris. The plaque at its base was corroded, but faint Cyrillic letters were still visible. Orloj, 1968. The name matched nothing in any known registry of Warsaw Pact communication stations. A later digital excavation of declassified Czechoslovak military logs revealed a single reference dated August 27, 1968, 4 days after Soviet forces invaded Prague. Construction order received from Moscow under Directive 4429, codename Orloj, to be operational within 72 hours. The term Orloj, meaning clock in Czech, puzzled historians. Initial surveys by the Slovak National Museum suggested it might have been part of a radar relay network used to coordinate troop movements during the occupation. But a deeper examination of the site revealed a far more complex purpose. Underneath the tower was a reinforced chamber accessible only through a vertical shaft sealed by a welded iron hatch. Inside, they found a circular operations room preserved by cold and vacuum. Dust-covered consoles lined the walls, labeled in both Cyrillic and Czech, with rotary switches and magnetic tape machines stacked in rows. None of the systems bore standard Warsaw Pact manufacturing codes. The labeling style, stenciled in red with sequential designations like TX01, RX03, SYNC-H4, matched those used by the Soviet Main Directorate of Radio Intelligence (GRU) Unit 443 in the early 1960s. The discovery immediately attracted intelligence historians from across Europe. Dr. Tomasz Bartosz, a communications archaeologist from Charles University in Prague, led the investigation. His team catalogued dozens of reels of degraded magnetic tape. One had survived intact, stored in a metal tin marked Vesna Echo Alpha 3. When played through a restored reader, the reel emitted faint static and bursts of human voice. Shortwave transmissions in English, Polish and German, layered over a rhythmic tone sequence. After digital restoration, the voices became distinguishable. They were reading fragments of NATO field orders, interspersed with deliberate distortions and false coordinates. According to Bartosz, the tapes were not recordings of intercepted Western messages. They were simulations, meticulously scripted to sound authentic. Orloj, it appeared, had been designed to broadcast falsified transmissions into Western listening networks, mimicking NATO communications to generate confusion and false intelligence. It was a Cold War ghost station, one that no one was ever meant to find. The recovered logbooks dated between 1968 and 1971. They contained operational shift notes, most written in terse technical shorthand. The entries referenced Directive Vesna Echo, a disinformation campaign reportedly aimed at destabilizing NATO signal integrity during the peak of the Warsaw Pact's psychological warfare efforts. One log entry dated 14th November 1969 read, "Transmission successful. Western response confirmed. Repeat sequence Alpha 3 every 48 hours. Another note, unsigned, bore a chilling message. Operator D5 compromised. Evacuation ordered. Seal tower. After that, the records ended abruptly. Subsequent reels were blank, declassified. Czechoslovak internal security files later revealed that several technicians assigned to remote communications facilities in the Tatras went missing in the winter of 1970. Their families received official notices citing accidental exposure to extreme conditions. However, forensic analysis of human remains recovered near the Orloj site decades later told a different story. Traces of cyanide residue in bone tissue, consistent with self-administered ampules issued to intelligence personnel during Code Black operations. Someone had been ordered to destroy evidence and themselves along with it. Chapter 4. The Black Archive of Okinawa. It began with a construction crew widening the foundations of a logistics warehouse near Kadena Air Base in June 2019. A hydraulic drill struck a sealed chamber, and the operator reported the smell of oil and rust. Beneath 3 meters of reinforced concrete, workers uncovered a watertight steel container the size of a small car, welded shut and stenciled with faded US Navy ordnance codes, USN Pakfelti Property of Komnavfi, 1946. The discovery site lay inside an area once designated for post-war waste disposal by the US Civil Administration of the Ryukyu Islands. When engineers pried the container open, it revealed canisters, film reels, and boxes of documents wrapped in wax paper, all preserved against the tropical humidity. The seal inside one box read, Project Night Lantern, File Series NL47 Kadena Segment. The Defense Department sent representatives within 48 hours. Official statements described the find as historical training materials of no operational relevance. Yet local archivist Dr. Eiji Tanaka, who catalogued the crates before their removal, photographed several items that contradicted that narrative. Among them was a reel labeled NL12, Test Footage Biological Trials Ryukyu Chain. Another envelope bore the annotation, Unit 942, classified until 1999, renewal authorized indefinitely. The paper stock and typeface matched the US Navy Bureau of Medicine forms, used in the immediate aftermath of World War II. The accompanying manifest listed both American and Japanese personnel, many with pseudonyms. At the bottom, a signature stood out in faint blue ink. Lieutenant CMDR J.H. Halverson, Biochem Div, Okinawa Proving Detachment. No such detachment appears in Navy historical registers. Tanaka managed to copy one roll of film before federal custody seized the container. The footage, later analyzed by a consortium of Japanese historians, showed aerial views of small islands, likely within the Sakashima group, followed by ground scenes of men in protective suits setting up sealed tents. On a clipboard visible in one frame, the words Test Batch 4B, Aerosol Dispersal can be read. The footage ends with a close-up of dead seabirds washed onto coral shorelines. Radiation analysis of the film stock indicated minor contamination by organic isotopes, evidence that the recording itself had been exposed to experimental materials. Attempts to trace Project Night Lantern through US archives produced almost nothing. The National Archives in Maryland acknowledged temporary custody of related records in 1958, but reported them returned to Department of Defense. FOIA requests filed by investigative journalists were denied under Exemption 1, National Security Classification. One partial reference was found in the 1947 Navy Medical Research Annual Report, describing subtropical pathogen endurance testing conducted in conjunction with Allied specialists. The report was retracted from publication within months. Cross-referencing Unit 942 led researchers to declassified Japanese defense materials describing a joint recovery division established by US occupation authorities to seize and repurpose former Imperial Army biological research data. The connection to the notorious Unit 731 was obvious but never officially acknowledged. In 2020, Tanaka received an anonymous package containing a single microfiche envelope marked NL942B Segment 3. Inside were typed memos from the Office of Naval Research, dated 1946-1948, referencing post-war continuation studies utilizing imported expertise. One paragraph stated, "Trials at Site K7, Ryukyu Chain, yielded unacceptable containment failures. Recommend total neutralization and burial." The coordinates listed corresponded closely to an uninhabited island south of Okinawa, now restricted for environmental reasons. Satellite imagery shows uniform craters along its northern reef, consistent with controlled detonations. The term neutralization may have meant something far darker. Former US Navy technician Raymond Carr, who served at Kadena in the early 1950s, later testified in a 2004 veterans hearing about mysterious sealed drums dumped into coastal trenches. He recalled labels reading NL material returned to sender. His affidavit was filed and subsequently lost. Only a redacted copy resurfaced in 2021, containing the line, "We were told it was chemical waste from decontamination labs, but the smell was wrong. It was sweet, like burnt fruit." Forensic chemists reviewing his account noted that early nerve agents such as tabun and sarin possess similar olfactory profiles when degraded. In 2022, a joint Japanese-US environmental survey investigating coral damage near the same region detected traces of organophosphates and bacterial spores in sediment cores. The findings were dismissed as industrial contamination, though the isotopic ratios were consistent with synthetic compounds produced during wartime research. When Dr. Tanaka published his independent report linking these results to Project Night Lantern, his university contract was terminated within 3 months. He has since relocated to Taipei, where he continues to digitize his private copies of the NL reels. One of them, restored in 4K resolution, includes a frame showing US officers standing beside crates marked repatriated material, property of former IJA Unit 731. The implication is unambiguous. After Japan's surrender, biological weapons data and samples were not destroyed, they were integrated. Another disturbing lead emerged when journalist Aiko Mori uncovered correspondence between the US Strategic Scientific Reserve and the newly formed Naval Medical Research Unit, NAMRU, in 1947. One letter, archived in the Truman Presidential Library under restricted category Foreign Technical Acquisition, states, Night Lantern objectives align with continuation of regional field exposure analysis initiated under former Japanese assets. Recommend site permanence under classified oversight. Handwritten at the bottom is an instruction. Transfer NL4 documentation to Kadena repository. No public reference. By 1952, any trace of Night Lantern had vanished. The biological warfare ban of the 1972 Biological Weapons Convention rendered such archives illegal to maintain. Yet environmental scans conducted in 2019 revealed abnormal chemical residues within the Kadena subsoil near the discovery site. Compounds containing fluorinated organophosphates, not commercially produced until decades later. The Pentagon attributed the contamination to fuel storage leaks. But the internal DoD environmental remediation file, obtained by whistleblower route in 2024, lists the incident under historical project tag NL47, ongoing mitigation. The remarks section reads simply, do not excavate further, contents unstable. When asked for comment, both US and Japanese defense ministries insisted that Project Night Lantern has no basis in historical documentation. But the evidence now archived in Scattered Personal Collections tells another story, a clandestine series of post-war biological field tests designed to study aerosol pathogen dispersal in subtropical climates, utilizing data and personnel from Japan's wartime research units. Whether human subjects were involved remains unknown, yet in one recovered photograph from 1947, blurred figures in civilian dress appear beside military scientists. The accompanying caption, written in English, reads, Volunteers from Local Island Population, Phase 2. Chapter 5. The Iron Vault beneath Lake Geneva. The alarm sounded at 02:47 on a cold morning in March 2024, when maintenance engineers at the Secheron hydroelectric station near Lake Geneva noticed an unexpected pressure shift inside a service conduit sealed since the 1960s. Believing it to be a structural issue, they opened the hatch and discovered a descending stairwell absent from every blueprint. At the bottom stood a rusted steel door bearing an old emblem from the early years of a European defense alliance. Beyond it, submerged beneath a thin layer of water, was a chamber packed with crates, filing cabinets, and cylindrical storage pods. The crates were marked Eyes Only, Helios Directive. The engineers notified Swiss authorities, and by dawn, military police had closed the site. Within a day, the area was placed under a rare national security alert, a classification unused since the Cold War. For decades, Switzerland's neutrality made Geneva a crossroads for quiet diplomacy. Few imagined that beneath its lake, beneath the city of peace talks, lay a forgotten alliance archive. When investigators first entered the chamber, they found signs of a hurried abandonment. Overturned desks, charred folders, and melted sheeting fused to the floor. Radiation sensors indicated faint traces of aged industrial isotopes, suggesting that the facility once supported advanced energy or communications research. Among the debris were microfilm reels labeled Helios Phase 3, Early Warning Integration Tests. The films contained diagrams for a prototype satellite relay system dated 1959, apparently capable of detecting atmospheric launches within seconds, technology far ahead of its time. A warped logbook bore entries signed by both American and French engineers. The final line, dated 12th December 1959, read, Directive Helios suspended by command authority. Risk of disclosure unacceptable. Proceed with containment. In the margins, someone had scribbled in hurried French, Le réseau ne doit jamais voir le jour. The network must never see daylight. The implication was unsettling. Helios had been a surveillance framework so extensive that even its own creators decided to hide it. Documents suggested that the system's test phase operated in neutral Switzerland under the cover of hydrological studies. Declassified alliance papers from the era confirm internal disagreements over information sharing. One 1960 memorandum described unauthorized duplication of satellite data via Geneva relay nodes. The coordinates matched the hydroelectric station. Over time, the project was erased from maps, its remnants hidden in maintenance archives under harmless-sounding engineering codes. In April 2024, a joint European team reconstructed the chamber's inventory. Inside corrosion-resistant canisters, they found hundreds of data cards, early digital storage etched with binary, patterns and English labels such as Phase 4, Continuous, Observation Field, notes referenced pending. Integration with orbital instruments. Months before the launch of the first recognized reconnaissance satellite, a sealed envelope marked Personnel, Helios Dissolution, detailed the shutdown procedures. One page confirmed that the main archive had been transferred to a vault beneath Lake Geneva by mutual agreement with Swiss officials, access limited to designated defense councils. The government later acknowledged historic cooperation during a period of heightened tension, while maintaining that its role was logistical rather than technical. Journalists, following the trail, uncovered records of shipments labeled optical sensor arrays sent to Geneva between 1958 and 1960, equipment likely intended for early infrared observation. Historians now believe the Helios Directive represented one of the first serious attempts at continuous orbital monitoring, linking ground sensors, high-altitude platforms, and encrypted relays hidden within Europe's landscape. By mid-2024, the discovery had become a diplomatic concern. International agencies declined comment. Legal restrictions were imposed on the recovered files, and archival material was quietly reclaimed by participating nations. Yet partial images of the data cards leaked to independent researchers. One card carried a decoded header: Observation Network Active, Test Successful, Node Status, Continuous. The timestamp, 24 March 1961. That same month, Swiss meteorological logs recorded unexplained electromagnetic patterns across several alpine stations, possibly the brief activation of the Helios network. Even after its supposed closure, anomalies persisted. In April 2024, low-frequency radio signals repeating every 36 hours were detected beneath the lake. Technicians attributed them to infrastructure noise, though analysts noted similarities to 1960s test transmissions. The vault's aging systems, it seemed, might still be intermittently active, perhaps awakened by modern maintenance work. When private contractors attempted a deeper survey, security teams intervened and ordered a halt. Later that year, an anonymous envelope reached a Geneva newsroom containing a restored film fragment from the early 1960s. The footage showed a control room filled with Allied officers around a large world map. A narrator stated calmly, "Helios operational, Phase 4 achieved. Continuous observation capability confirmed." The film ended with the Alliance emblem and the words, "End of demonstration." No public record of that presentation exists. By December 2024, authorities permanently sealed the vault with reinforced concrete and stationed guards around the clock. Officially, it is now labeled a hydrological safety zone. Yet satellite imagery reveals new underwater conduits leading toward the same coordinates, hinting at renewed monitoring. Officials have neither confirmed nor denied the reports. What remains certain is that the Helios Directive was not a myth, but a prototype, an early network born of Cold War anxiety, capable of observing both allies and rivals, then buried beneath Europe's most neutral waters. Its rediscovery poses an unsettling question. If such a system could sleep unseen beneath Lake Geneva for 6 decades, how many others might still whisper beneath the continent's soil, waiting for a forgotten signal to awaken them? The Iron Vault, once thought silent, may not be silent at all. Its instruments could still be listening, their purpose unchanged since 1959, to see everything and to say nothing.